Jacques Talk is sponsored by Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan Injury Attorneys.
Peter Burns works for ESPN and the SEC network, and he's become very popular with LSU fans over the years. He joins us right now as LSU has obviously made the big move and fired Brian Kelly. Peter, good to see you, man.
Hey, it's I was just talking about it a couple of days ago with some of my friends born and raised in Port Allen. I'd be like, is there a more interesting beat than LSU athletics? I mean, you get national championships, you get the highest of the highs, and honestly, on Saturday night was probably the lowest of the lows that we see a coaching change being made over on that Sunday, and it just goes to show you, man, there's not a dull moment when covering the LSU Tigers.
Yeah, Peter, it's the ultimate reality show. It never stops, and this thing has been attached to my body since Sunday afternoon, I guess, when I sensed a disturbance in the force. Certainly, they wouldn't fire Brian Kelly, right? I mean, they're going to serve up a pound of flesh and then Joe Sloan, maybe Brad Davis, but no, they went through with it. So what's your reaction from I don't want to say afar because you're very connected, but what's your viewpoint from there?
I mean, the reaction is, Jacques, this is the future of college football, right? With so many phone calls being made to boosters week in and week out, asking for more money, more money, more money. And sooner or later, these boosters, the power brokers that are around, are going to say, what's my return of investment? I'm going to give you all of that money, but we need to make sure that we win and we win right now. And in an expanded college football playoff, there's no reason why an LSU team after 4 years shouldn't be in the conversation, shouldn't be in the playoff. And I think a lot of power brokers felt that way. And I think a lot of it was a disconnect with Brian Kelly. And I think a lot of it came down to it. It's like coming off the heels of Ed Ogeron, you felt like that guy would just do anything for Louisiana State football. I don't know if there was a feeling amongst that with the fan base from day one with Brian Kelly and even inside the building, not only with the staff and really with the players.
Yeah. Well, Peter, when they hire a coach, it's a marriage. This is our guy. We got to make this work. We got to build our brand. We got to protect this guy. We got to keep it as positive as we can be. But man, when they're done with you, they're done with you. I mean, it's over. And now, you know, you're hearing the things that we kind of knew all along that you don't want to bring up because you just don't want to be negative. But look, whether it's Peter Burns, Jacques Doucet, Brian Kelly, people can say that's just the way he is. And that's just the way he is. It just doesn't feel like human relationships and building relationships and engaging people. He's just not interested really in doing that.
Yeah, and again, not everybody is that way. I mean, listen, I'm a diehard golfer. Nick Saban's a diehard golfer. I try to talk to Nick Saban about golf. He doesn't want to have any interest in talking about it, right? I mean, just some guys are built that way. But again, and I don't mind Scott Woodward swinging for the fences. I mean, on paper, this made a lot of sense. A guy that had a lot of success, but never really had the recruits and the foundation to win a national championship at Notre Dame. Why not have a Hall of Fame coach come down here? I mean, Kim Mulkey won a national championship. You look at what Jay Johnson's brought. So he's had some home run hires. It might look a little bit different for BK. But at the end of the day, you're right. There was just never that love between the fan base, the players, and the coaching staff. And that's not new. Everybody comes out of their stories. And what I don't like is everyone going, I knew this wasn't going to work. I mean, there is no such thing as a home run hire in college football. I mean, I would have thought Scott Frost going to Nebraska, where he played and was a successful coach after UCF, that's a home run hire, right?
Yeah.
And so everything is a little bit different right now. But what you realize is that when it went bad quickly. And I think it realized, too, that Brian Kelly and Scott Woodward realized that those phone calls they were making about getting extra donor support for players and NIL, they weren't going to have that support coming up next year. And you might have that support if you're well liked with the fan base or, you know, you're well liked with I wouldn't say media, but just the power brokers. But Brian Kelly never bridged those relationships. And therefore, when it went sour quickly.
Yeah. To your point, Les Miles at Oklahoma State, I think, was 28-21 overall. And look what his record was at LSU. Ed Ogeron, look at his record when he was the head coach at Ole Miss. Look what he did at LSU.
Saban at Michigan State as well, too.
Exact. Right. LSU had a reputation of elevating coaches to places they had never been before. So if you look at Brian Kelly's resume, and I know people will say, well, he didn't play the competition he played at LSU against SEC competition, but look, winning is winning. He was what, 34-6 at Cincinnati. His last like 4 or 5 years at Notre Dame, 10-2, 11-1, 10-2. I mean,
he's
he
a
was
Hall of
doing
Fame coach. Coach in college football. The problem was that he was also a made man because of that Hall of Fame resume. And I'm a firm believer at this point where you have to have a certain hunger. I see that out of Kirby Smart every single day in Athens. Jacques, is the fact that every single day Kirby wakes up, he's deathly afraid that someone has caught up to that program. And I felt that way about Ogeron. I felt that way about Miles, albeit he was a little bit of a different character. And I damn sure felt that way about Nick Saban. And that's the disconnect. And I think you're right. When you're talking about a home run hire, is it a coach? Is it Lane Kiffin? Is it this guy? Whatever. The home run here is LSU. The home run is LSU football. You can inherit, you can turn it into a Hall of Fame career because it is LSU. And now we're understanding that if you're going to hire a legacy coach, that legacy coach still needs to have the fire burning, because if it's not, then you're just collecting a paycheck, and that ultimately would end up happening. And you're going to get a big paycheck to not coach over at LSU.
Yeah, well, that was the skepticism. I think one thing you could fault LSU is not hiring Brian Kelly, but the 10-year contract that's 90% guaranteed. How driven is somebody to do well? You would hope that Brian Kelly says, I've never won a national championship. I'm going to work hard to do so. And some people will say, well, LSU was his golden parachute to retirement or whatever the case may be. But I think I don't have a problem, Peter, with coaches yelling at players or yelling at assistant coaches. I think the problem comes in where if he's not as invested, like you said, as the assistant coaches and the players are not working as hard, then who the hell are you showing up here and acting indignant? Or if that's the right word.
Yeah. And again, I think there's also people in that coaching staff that just because Brian Kelly was out of Baton Rouge and spending his time elsewhere or out on the golf course playing, people are going, he wasn't locked in. But at the same point, I think there were probably people in that football building too that didn't mind that, because they got to be more hands-on, that they were the guys that were really kind of making some of the choices. So it's a collective, of kind of, hey, you all look around yourself now and go, all right, how do you make this better? Who is the next person that you hire that's going to bring back LSU football to where it should be, which is in the college football playoff discussion each and every season?
Yeah. Well, and we're going to pile on. Let me say some positive things. He inherited a mess. And certainly in his first year, I think he did his best job. They overachieved. And you had that great moment in Tiger Stadium, right? When they went for two and beat Alabama. You won't forget that the rest of your life. That was one of the most exciting games I've ever seen in that stadium. And they reached the SEC championship. And some people will say, well, his record would have been even worse if he didn't have Jaden Daniels. Well, he recruited Jaden Daniels and they coached him. And so, it's always funny how hard we work to discredit people sometimes. I heard the same thing about Dabo Swinney. Well, he can't win if he doesn't have Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. Well, that's part of his job to recruit superstar players. Ed Ogeron wouldn't have won without Joe Burrow. Well, if Joe Burrow played for Texas A&M and led them to a title, you'd be saying, why didn't we get Joe Burrow? So let's give him some credit. But I think the disappointment started coming in 2023. Could have been a special team. They weren't. In the last 2 years, Peter, I'm going to be honest, they've played some stretches of some pretty bad football. Last year against Alabama at home. Last year at A&M. Last year at Florida. This year, this A&M game was, rock bottom for him at LSU.
Well, what it felt was soft. And that's a word that's not synonymous with LSU football ever, truly. But really, when Saban kind of built that foundation, that it didn't matter. Like, no one was going to push you around. You were going to be scared of playing LSU football. And LSU football wasn't a point now, Jacques, where you were scared to play them. And you looked at it as an opportunity, right? That they were weakened. And I think that's the part that really kind of perturbs LSU. And I think it falls away with, no matter how good LSU was offensively, I'll be honest with you. I grew up watching LSU be great on defense, and that's what I know LSU for. They're going to run the ball extremely well. They're going to play great defense. And when you're going to go to the bathroom at a game or while you're at home or you're watching it, you can't go when LSU's playing defense because you got to be dialed into that. And we saw glimpses of it, but there was never really complimentary football right now. Now I know that's tougher right now than ever before because of the transfer portal and NIL. But that needed to be different, and it's not. And again, I think Brian Kelly always got a bad rap on television because early in his career, he was demonstrative, he was fiery. So a television director, anytime something bad would go, what they do is they would cut to a shot directly of Brian Kelly, right? And about, how is he going to react to this? And Brian Kelly would often deliver, right?
Yeah.
He would be upset or look befuddled or ripping into somebody. Like, we also did that with Nick Saban, and Saban would be up 60, and he'd still be coaching that way. So, again, he didn't do himself any favor at that point, but I don't ever talk cross about him because I think he got a bad rap because, by all accounts, at least to me and people that I know about him in the media, he was fairly nice and accommodating. The problem was that even the wins that he got, there wasn't a lot of them, even the wins didn't feel much fun, despite that, great Jaden Daniels 2-point conversion win.
Yeah. Well, and the average season ticket holder doesn't care what I think about it, but from a media perspective, I thought he was a lot better than what I expected. I mean, if I saw him, he'd come up to me, talk to me. He was friendly, and he gave us more access at practice than any coach had ever given us. We could go to practice and watch and kind of get a nice feel of who could play and who couldn't and see stuff. And so I appreciate all that. But you mentioned Les Miles, and I've kind of said this team needs a big shot of the Les Miles era. And look, Les has maybe his perspective, some people's perspective on him has changed, or that's been labeled like as a time that LSU was like losing and they stunk or something. Look, his biggest sin was he couldn't beat Nick Saban most of the time. But like you said, when they lost games, they didn't lose games because they got pushed around. They lost games because their offensive scheme was outdated. Their quarterback play couldn't measure up, but they always punched you in the mouth for the most part. They could run the football and they were physical, and all those things are kind of missing right now.
Well, and that's where you're trying to go the next direction with them is figure out who's that guy that's going to bring that physicality back to LSU football, John.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about who's going to be the next guy. So you cover the SEC. So Lane Kiffin seems to be in a nice spot right now where he's either going to leverage Florida and LSU against Ole Miss and get a big pay raise there. Some people say as long as he wins 9-10 games at Ole Miss and maybe makes a playoff here or there, they won't fire him. Although we have seen over the years at some point they might say, well, when are you going to take us to the next level, Lane? But if he comes to Florida or LSU, the expectations and the pressure is a lot different, I think. But would he come to LSU? That's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I keep going back to right now, Jacques, with Lane is that we've had this whole kind of washing away of the old Lane Kiffin. They just had the documentary and how he's a changed person. And even on social media, a lot of it has been, why are you going? The grass is not greener type deal. And when I hear that, I think it would be kind of a Benedict Arnold move to say how much you love Ole Miss over and over and post all these memes about how much you love this and you needed Oxford more than Oxford needed you, and then you just leave, right? Like you can't rehab your image only so you could use it to get somewhere differently. So I always think that there's something in Lane Kiffin that's just not waiting to explode, but there's still that devil on his little shoulder about like, oh, you shouldn't tweet this or you shouldn't go for this on fourth down. And yet he cannot get over it.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think you need Lane Kiffin at LSU to win national championships. He hasn't even made the college football playoff at Ole Miss yet. And I think he's a hell of a coach. I think he's done a great job, but I think that there's other people out there that would personify LSU football just as good, and you wouldn't have to probably pay them the king's ransom that Lane's going to want.
Yeah. John Summerall, Tulane, he's a young, strikes me as a tough kind of iron jaw guy, but with LSU, will they turn their nose up and say, we don't hire the coach at Tulane? Kind of what we also heard about Billy Napier, who did not work at Florida, but did an amazing job with the Cajuns an hour down the road. We don't hire the coach of the Raging Cajuns. That's
Right.
got to be another discussion.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to hire the guy that coached at Oklahoma State, Les Miles. You're not going to hire the guy at Michigan State. We don't have Northerners down here. Like a fit's a fit, you know. And I mean, if Summerall is that guy, you can do it. I think Brent Key over at Georgia Tech is really interesting. I mean, the first phone call I'm making, all joking aside, and I know that they'll say no, is you call Nick Saban and just be like, I'm just sure that you and Miss Terry don't want to close the loop here and coach for a couple more years. I mean, if the president of the United States is almost 80 years old, you can coach for a couple more years at LSU football. I'm fine with that, but I don't think that's going to happen. The second phone call I make, Jacques, is to Dan Lanning at Oregon. And I just go, Dan, you've been a part of the SEC. You were defensive coordinator for Kirby. You know what it's like, feet to the fire. I know you're probably sick and tired of Oregon having to go cross country to play Rutgers or Minnesota in front of 50,000 people. Come to the best conference in college football. The only problem with that is I believe Dan Lanning not only makes a boatload of money, but also has a personal service contract with Nike that's probably, you know, giving him about $25-30 million of stock that I think is tough to compete with. So it's going to be fascinating. And now the extra wrinkle, not that it's a surprise to Louisianans, but the fact that the governor and politicians are probably going to be more involved in this than ever before. And I've never met a sports story that involves more politicians that ends up being easier to solve. And so that's another interesting wrinkle that you're going to have with the governor of the state being involved and the board being involved as well. I go back and I challenge anybody that doesn't think Scott Woodward's a good athletic director to say, go look at Jay Johnson. You could have hired anybody, and that is one of the crown jewels of all of college athletics, not just SEC baseball, but college athletics is LSU baseball. And he hired the right guy. Right. Kim Mulkey, you're not going to argue that she's not the right person. Even when Dee Bro decided to step back from gymnastics, he could look around and hire anybody he wanted. He said, Jay Clark's my guy. And Jay Clark wins a national championship. So if it's national championships, you can say, hey, this is what you brought to LSU at this point. So I don't know how that plays out. That's definitely above my pay grade. But if Scott Woodward is out at some point at LSU, if the biggest sin he ever had was swinging for the fences, hiring a college football head coach, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Well, certainly when they got him, when Scott Woodward came here, it was a dream come true. And let's be honest, Joe Oliva wasn't the most popular guy in the world around here. And Scott was a Baton Rouge guy and an LSU guy. And like you said, he's made some tremendous hires and won some championships and whatnot. I think what's the old saying? An AD gets a chance to hire one football coach. You can hire one football coach, although Joe Dean hired a couple. But that was his guy, big swing. And Brian Kelly didn't work out. Although, Peter, when's your birthday? When were you born?
79.
79. You remember Curly Holman?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So look, people say, duh, it's even a stupid point, but Curly Holman coached 4 years here in the early 90s. He went 16-28 and he was 10-21 in SEC play. Brian Kelly goes 71% and he's 19-10 in the SEC and he's fired. So, but you know, the expectations have changed, the national championships have changed, and the money invested into the coach, the assistant coaches, the roster has all just put this thing just hyper, you know, and just some sort of steroid now.
At the end of the day, Jacques, you know it, I know it, the fans watching this know it. Everybody works really hard and spends a lot of time, money, and effort supporting LSU football, right? It's the lifeblood of what LSU athletics is financially and just on spiritually. And so you just hope that whoever gets hired next has that love, that care, that passion for LSU as much as we all do. And I think that's the number one thing. I don't care about offensive scheme. I don't care about defensive scheme. I don't care how much money they make or whatever. Are you going to wake up every single day and thank the Lord that you are the head coach over at LSU and you're going to work your butt off to make sure that no one beats you and do your best? And that's all you can ask for at that point. I think that's why this is going to be by far the number one job opening in this coaching carousel.
And winning, if he would have won, all these things are not important, or a lot of these things are not important. But from day one, Peter, when he gets off the plane, and there's fans all along the fence to see the new head coach. It was like the president of the United States landing in Baton Rouge, and from like a mile away, he gives like some little wave, gets in the car and drives off. It's like, why didn't you walk over there? Why didn't you just like say, hey, go Tigers, thanks for coming. All right, here we go. The coaches show, used to be during the commercial break, you could walk up to the coach, take a picture, get an autograph. They stopped all that. State troopers, stay away. I mean, those things were bad moves, in my opinion. Now, do they mean anything in wins and losses? No. But the new guy, you're a piece of clay. Let these people mold you a little bit. Lean into it a little bit. You've got the most passionate fan base out there. Utilize it. I just don't think he ever utilized his fan base like he could have.
No. And again, if I was worth $100 million, no matter what happens, I don't know how much. I look at this and go, hey, I've arrived. You're lucky to have me. I've decided to do that. And I think the next opinion needs to be, I'm lucky to have the state of Louisiana and the brand of LSU with me. And that's going to elevate us together. And I don't think that there's a doubt that whoever interviews and ever gets that job is going to be that person that's going to dive 100% in. You know how these things work. When you fire a coach, you look for the opposite of what that other coach was. And this one will be all in on LSU. They'll bring back some physicality, and they'll be out there carrying 365, 24/7.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you look at the history, Saban was very tense and on 11 all the time. Les came across as more kind of easy to work with, more kind of folksy, hey, it's okay, chill out type thing. And then, Ogeron was obviously kind of, wild man to an extent. They go, and from afar, Brian Kelly, more buttoned up CEO, less emotional in some aspects. So, yeah, I totally agree.
Which they needed, John. I mean, I'll be honest with you. After 2020, they probably needed a little bit of keeping everything in order. And I think that there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes, CEO and just the organizational management of how a program is run behind the scenes. I think there were some good things that BK did, but there still is a disconnect that you have to win those games. You have to have the crowd and the fans and the players and I mean, I've never seen a situation where a head coach got fired and a couple recruits committed after that. Normally it's the opposite. It's the opposite. Everybody like decommits. No, LSU recruits itself. I don't worry about a recruiter to LSU. The brand is too powerful to do that, but you have to lead them to victories.
Yeah, that's a cool place to be. I mean, you've got Flau'jae Johnson there. You've got Livy Dunn there. You've got, like you said, Jay Johnson. Baseball makes the springtime exciting into the summer. Men's basketball needs to be fixed. We know that. But it's never boring. There's a lot of excitement over there all the time. It seems to recruit itself, like you said. Yep. So I appreciate your time, man. I'll let you go because it's only October the 28th. And this thing is they're not gonna hire a coach. What would you think? I mean, I think Kelly was hired a couple of days after the regular season finale in 21, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, again, the transfer portal is going to play a role into this because that transfer portal opens up January the 2nd. So I would imagine they want a coach who's in the college football playoff running, or at least, was in the running, but then out of it late. So I would imagine somewhere between, mid-December to New Year's, those 2 weeks. That's when it's going to happen, because if you don't hire somebody before the semifinals and the national championship are going to exclude you from diving into the transfer portal. And you can't do that. You set yourself back so far. I mean, think about the Saints deciding, well, we're just not going to do free agency this year. You can't do that. Although you could argue that they might be even better than they are now. But no NFL team would do it, and no college football team is going to go a full year of saying we don't need the portal or the early signing period. So that hire has to be made between, I would imagine, SEC championship game being in the books and the semifinals in January for the college football playoff.
Yeah, we've had a rough one down here, Peter. Southern and LSU both fired their head coaches in the same week. I joke, good thing BRCC doesn't play football. They would fire their guy too, I guess. And the Saints have won one game. to your point. So I remember in 2011, the Saints, although they didn't win a Super Bowl, and LSU, although they didn't win a national championship, they were like at the height of their powers, and every weekend was just like win, and we're far away from that at the moment. But anyway, thanks for joining us today, man. The Port Allen Pelicans, I think they're a little up and down too. Hopefully they finish strong.
Thanks, Jacques. I appreciate the invite, man.
Okay. Thank you, sir.